within my company, we had an amazing, what I call doctrine, which was our company's principles and values. Integrity, communication, receiving information thoughtfully, trying your best, working hard, but having fun. None of this is earth shattering, but when you put them together and every moment you have something happening around you and you say, okay, what's the best thing to do right now? Well, what's the best thing to do if you act with integrity? What's the best thing to do to communicate correctly? So what can I do with what I have? And is there something I can do beyond what I have and try something new?
Welcome to Biotech Bites, where we speak with technology leaders in biotech. We talk about current trends in technology and kind of get their thoughts and feelings on those trends. And I'm your host, Steve Swan. Today I'm joined by Pasqual Zottola. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. This is great. So you're with Acorda Therapeutics. And, I always like starting out with sort of the big picture from a technology perspective, and then we'll get into some of the other things, right? But from a technology perspective, what do you think, or what have you seen over your time, over the recent past, as to what's affecting us, our industry, and maybe what will affect our industry in the near future?
Sure. I don't think anything I bring up at this point will be earth-shattering. I think it's pretty much what people think. For me, as part of my transformation for Acorda over the last few years, it was certainly looking at cloud-based systems, SaaS systems, finding out which ones were the best value for the organization and migrating from, the typical on-premise. So that's a big one. And there's a lot of considerations there. Of course, as it's on the tip of everyone's tongue, artificial intelligence and of course, data and analytics in general are huge. I think they're excellent tools that are still just at the beginning of being used correctly. And I think that's going to be transformational in a lot of areas if done correctly. I think those are the two big ones that I would point out first.
Sure. Absolutely. Now, one of the things I like to talk about as we get into the conversations with leaders, I like to hear about, how did you get to where you are, right? What brought you to where you are today and formed you as a leader?
Sure. Well, I've been at my company for 24 years.
Wow.
So it's been a long journey. It's been a great journey. Certainly, I acknowledge atypical for someone in an IT position in general. But my company was such an amazing ride, such an amazing journey. And the way I couch it is it's never been the same company for more than 2 or 3 years at a time. I started at the company way back in 2000 as about the 21st person coming into the organization. And it just took off from there. We went through, we're a biotech, obviously. We went through clinical trials. We had our share of failures, our share of successes. We went public, took the company through the SOX process. Finally, getting approval for our flagship drug, building out a sales force. It's all the typical stuff, building out a drug safety system, a quality system, everything that's required, supporting R&D, supporting clinical, up through acquisitions, divestitures, building out multiple offices. It's just been an amazing ride, and just all the stuff that people do, maybe jumping between multiple companies, I've had the pleasure of doing at the one company where I started my leadership career. And it's just been a great ride.
20 plus years. I don't have numbers in front of me, but you're way out on the end of the bell shape.
I think
you're
so.
Way out on the
all
tail.
The way out to the right. Yeah.
All the way out. I mean, woo. I thought I remembered reading once, leaders, will last around 3 years-ish, 20 something years. Boy, that's definitely beyond the 1%. I'm certain that it's gotta be, so that's all good stuff.
I've always embraced doing things a little bit differently.
Good. And so tell me about that a little bit, right? So as a leader inside your organization, I mean, one of the things we've talked about in the past is how, you've held on to your team. You've kept this core team through the thick and through thin. I mean, obviously they like what they're doing. I always say to people when it comes to retaining, right, talent and retaining employees, I always equate it all the way back to, things that we know and things that we're used to. We learned when we were little kids. And one of the ways that I always felt that I could keep kids coming back to my team as I was a coach was if they're learning things and if they're having fun, so
right.
That's me as a coach, not you as a leader. But I just kind of want to throw that back at you. Why would you say you're successful there?
Well, a couple of thoughts come to mind. You use the metaphor of a team, and it's apt. It's an absolutely apt metaphor. And so the first, I live on these little aphorisms and sayings that I've collected over time. And the first one that comes to mind is, don't manage the team you want, manage the team you have. Especially being in a startup and going through so many inflection points, and it's a fight. IT is a value driver to an organization, but we're often, we're not considered as highly as commercial or clinical or safety, although we are right there partnering with them. So you don't always get the exact team you want. You don't always get the positions or the quality of people. And that's where leadership comes in, and really being thoughtful in the process of when you get a position and you're hiring, you really have to take your time and do it right. Another old adage, hire slow, fire fast. Well, I don't necessarily fully subscribe to that, but the hire slow part, I definitely do. It's important. It's important to take your time and not just fill positions with bodies. These are people. These are careers you're helping to develop for them. And you're looking to get your value out of that person and give them at least the same value back. So for me, it's always been very important to think of the team. I try often not to say my team. I'm just a part of the team. Those people, I'm no more or no less valuable than those people on the team. And it's really important to develop them. And so, yes, I definitely have folks on my team that have been here for a long time. I've had my share of people who've come and gone. And I always think that that's for the best. It's going to work out better for someone else. It's going to work out better for us if sometimes we part ways. But the folks that I have who have been on my team for 5, 6, 7, 10, 12 years, have really been valuable to that team and making it and me consequentially as successful as it's been. So it's been a great ride. And yes, in developing that talent and keeping that talent, it is really important to make sure that you're giving. I mean, people don't stick around if they don't feel like they're getting back, at least in kind, for what they're doing for an organization. So it's vitally important to keep that part of the deal or the bargain between myself and those team players, make sure that I'm honoring that all the time.
And well, let's, if you don't mind, dig into that a little bit, right? So a lot of leaders talk about, like you said, developing talent, keeping talent around, but specifically in developing talent, how would you say, you approach that? How do you do that differently than maybe someone else?
Well, it was a learning process. I wasn't always really good at it. It took time, and I certainly had my share of hits and misses early on in my career. You have to get past your own ego at some point and understand that I've seen it out there a lot. There are managers, there are people who can do, people who can manage, and people who can lead. And I've seen a lot of people at the, can manage stage who are sometimes actually sort of in contention with the people on their team, because it's a scary place to be leading a group of people. And some people tend to start worrying, well, if I let this team get too autonomous, if I develop these people too far, what am I here for? And again, another saying, right? It's a good leader is supposed to develop their team to the point that they are essentially expendable. The team could continue on without you. It's good succession planning for sure, but it's a really scary proposition. You're developing your career and you don't want to make yourself extinct. So it's certainly a balance, but I've always, at a certain point in my career, I began to embrace the fact that I need to bring in really good talent and develop them and not worry so much about myself. I always, came to the conclusion that would take care of itself. If I was doing a really good job with the team and the team was successful, then that reflects well on myself. And that gives me a reason to be valuable to my organization. I'm not sure if I sort of meandered beyond your question, but I think it's just important to develop that team in an honest, logical way. It's too easy to fall victim to, like I said, worrying too much about how much people are developing, or, well, if they develop too much, they're just going to want to keep getting promoted or move up too quickly. And the reality is you can't always do that. And now they're going to want to leave the organization because they've grown beyond what I can offer or beyond what the organization can offer. And again, it took some time to come to peace with that and say, that's okay. I want people to do really well in their careers. And that just may not be in my organization. It may be time for them to move on because I can't give them the next stage of what they need. And one of the ways that really was successful within my organization that helped is probably about 12 years ago, 8 to 12 years ago, we developed something called the IT Career Pathways document. And it was a very transparent, logical, truthful document that spoke to what it takes to move along your career pathway. That's the term we chose. And we liked that. You hear career ladder, but there's only two ways to go, up and down.
Yeah,
well,
right.
the pathway meanders, and that's okay. And so it was important to stress the value of a person's skills, their experience, their time in a position or their time in a role. All of those combined together and in very different ways for different people to really come to the conclusion that someone's ready to move along that pathway, with many other more realistic considerations. Does the organization even have a role for someone at this point? And it was tremendously successful. I feel it was something that was adopted through the organization and really helped folks on the team to understand, where they were at. Because I'm sure, Steve, you field a lot of calls from people who say, I've been here for 4 years. I deserve a promotion. It's not happening. Find me a new position. And it's not just time. Time is one part of it. Yes, 4 years, great. That's great. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're actually ready to move on within an organization. That is, it's everyone's choice to choose to move on to a different organization. And I thought it was vitally important and really helped folks in my team to understand the process so that there was less miscommunication or misunderstanding about that.
I think that's great because in my business, you're right. I see it from both sides, right? So I see the managers that will come in and, like you said, maybe they'll be scared to hire somebody better than them, and or what have you, right? And they don't have the same mindset as to the better my people are, the better I look because they're underneath me and we're going and we're doing our thing and I'm going to give them credit. Flip side of that, I see the individuals, right? They'll come to me even before they interview. So what's the career path? You got to map it out for me. Well, you can't do that. I mean, my answer always is it depends on you and it depends on the organization and it depends on the whole interaction and what happens there. You can't just have a conversation with a leader in HR and say, okay, in 3 years, you'll be at this level. In another year and a half, you'll be at this level, that kind of thing. And I think that the final piece that you hit on with your career pathway, right? And what you basically just said is managing expectations. My whole job is about managing expectations on both sides of the fence, right? And as long as I mean, if you and I were both going on a bus trip, right? It's supposed to be an 1.5-hour bus trip, and it ends up being a 2-hour bus trip, and I was expecting an 1.5 hours. I'm pissed, but if you were like, hey, I know that this trip's 2 hours, you're good with it because it's a 2-hour, So expectations are huge, and the fact that you've found a way or developed a way, really, over your years of experience to manage expectations, that's huge. I mean, expectations really are what sets people in different directions with different expectations,
It's completely logical to me. It's the kind of document I wish I had when I was young and starting out in IT and in various organizations where I worked. It's not perfect. It's a living document. We've adjusted it over time, of course, as a good document will do. But it was just vitally important. And another point to this, it's great that we were able to develop that document, but I know that it's not easy for everyone in a leadership position to do this. If you are not at a stage where your organization is mature, where you have the people and the time and the talent to do this. This wasn't just me sitting in a room developing this document. I had the directors in my team meet with me, and we hashed it out over months to really make sure we were covering the important aspects of career pathway development. And not everyone has that luxury of being able to take that time. You're constantly putting out fires. But
that's another thing too, right? Yeah.
I'm fortunate to know at that time when we developed this, I'm fortunate that we had the bandwidth to do it. And, you know, a lot of it is doing it at night after hours, but it was completely worthwhile. It avoided you know, it's the old take the short-term loss for the long-term gain. It allowed us to have so many less awkward interactions with folks who, you know, just feel like they're ready to move on. It was much easier. Of course, we always have conversations with people, but once the folks on the team read that document, they really got it. They understood what we were getting at. And it was vitally important to sort of keeping everyone in an equal understanding, everyone on the same page as to what it would take. So that was huge.
Is it something, I'm sorry, I'm sidetracking here. Is it something you actually talk about during the interview process, or is it something that somebody starts hearing about after they join the team?
No, we do talk about it at the interview process, of course. You know, at my company, we had what I think was a great onboarding process that included, you know, very firm commitments that we as hiring managers needed to make to the people we were bringing in. And that was an organization-wide onboarding process that we took part in creating and adhered to. But I certainly threw in, you know, my share, my herbs and spices within the IT team as far as, you know, the career pathways document and what it meant to me and what it could mean to someone coming into the organization. And I think, again, that's vitally important. I've done my share of interviews, both being the interviewer and the interviewee. And again, from a logical perspective, being truthful and honest is the only way to go. It was huge in bringing on good talent, because I think the feedback we received was, hey, I know what I'm getting. There's, you know, this isn't like I'm going to a dealer and buying a used car, but I'm not getting what I actually asked for. You know, people are being disingenuous. No, it was very obvious what the role was that the person was doing. Of course, with the requisite, listen, things change. And we always want people to stretch outside their role, but this is what we're looking for. This is what we think you are. Correct us if we're wrong on that. And, you know, and here is how we are going to bring you in, indoctrinate you and develop you in the organization to get the best out of you and for you to get the best out of us.
I mean, this is so refreshing, right? It's a people business. It is technology, right? But it's about the people, you know.
Steve, you know, if I had a dollar for every time I read an article about how IT is dead, or any technology, you know, when the iPad came out, the laptop, that was it. It was doomed. And it's just not true. And the same thing with people. At the end of the day, people make it happen. Yes, technology is great. And I know this is a technology podcast and we're not really talking technology a lot here.
Totally
but
fine.
My goal, I think, in coming into this is to be more foundational with you. The basic foundational things still work the same way. You know, it's almost like everything I needed to learn about life I learned in kindergarten. It's very foundational. We could spend 15 minutes talking about AI, and it's a great tool, and it will continue to be a great tool. It's just at its inception. But I think everything I've heard on both in people talking on your podcast and in other interviews and podcasts I've listened to is, you know, everybody keeps coming back to the data. The data has to be governed. The data has to be clean. The data has to be protected. And to me, that's not much different than what I learned in my very first college course for management information systems, which is garbage in, garbage out. You know, we learned it on day one in COBOL programming class. You can make the best program, but if the data isn't right, you're going to get nothing good out of this. You get no value. So the more things change, the more they stay the same. It's the same kind of thing. Same thing with the cloud. Cloud is great, but that doesn't mean that you go and take everything that's on-prem and throw it in the cloud. It looks great on your budget because now you've got very low CapEx, but guess what? Now it's all in computer expense. So you're not necessarily saving money there. You can. And, you know, sometimes try going to one of those cloud providers and get your data back. It's not easy. Once they have it, they're not really incentivized to give it back to you easily. So it makes migration or, you know, changing direction much harder. So we can talk technology for sure, but to me, it's the foundational things. It's building the right team and having the right people. Back to basics, absolutely. And that's where for me, my doctrine has always been around leadership, about, what is the best thing to do in this moment? And I push that throughout the team. What can I do? And I know in the military, they have doctrine, and a lot of that, I didn't serve in the military, but I did my research on it. And it's important. It's about saying, in this moment with what's going on, what would my commander tell me to do? And if my commander's not here, what should I do? And it's really just a basic logical process, so that you're calming the emotions and you are doing the right logical things in the moment to get the right outcome that you want. And when you can train people to do that, it's great. Probably the term train isn't great. It makes it sound like people are, easily trainable. But when you educate people on that process, it's very helpful. Within my company, we had an amazing, what I call doctrine, which was our company's principles and values. And it's 8 or 9 very simple things, integrity, communication, receiving information thoughtfully, trying your best, working hard, but having fun. They're real basic things, wow, that none of this is earth shattering. But when you put them together, and every moment you have something happening around you and you say, okay, what's the best thing to do right now? Well, what's the best thing to do if you act with integrity? What's the best thing to do to communicate correctly? We had another one, which was, we will find a way or make one. So what can I do with what I have? And is there something I can do beyond what I have and try something new? So aspirations that we have, and I've certainly taken them to heart, because they've been great. And guess what? When you come home and you have your personal life, they work there too, because they're universal. So it's been great to develop my leadership skills in an organization that's so open and encouraging to that. And it's just been a great ride. So foundationally, that's what I'm all about.
And it seems like your leadership style / skills, right, start from the very beginning of the process, right? Finding the right individuals and then going all the way through the whole life cycle with them, right? Because you've had people for, like you said, 7, 8, 10, 12 years. So you're not hiring somebody, burning them out and moving on to the next. It's far from that. You're doing the opposite, right? So
there's no value in that for myself, for the team, for the organization, or for the individual. People burn out for different reasons, and that's okay. But I make it my mission to not be the reason why people are burning out or being overworked or not feeling satisfied in their job. That just starts to create a toxic environment and challenging associates, and does nothing for anyone. And now I'm spending a large portion of my time on HR factors, and that's not where I am providing value to the organization. I can do that, but that's not what they're really compensating me for.
Right. No, of course not. Some point, I don't know if I can even ask you to see it. I wouldn't post it, but I'd love to see your career pathway document if I'm allowed to.
Oh, sure. I haven't copyrighted it, so and I'm happy to share it. Again, there's nothing proprietary in there, Steve. It's all good basic logic. Maybe we have some specific titles that are unique to Acorda, but other than that, it's really about, logical stuff on how to move. So absolutely, I'd be happy to share it with you.
What you learned and what you know how to do, you learned in kindergarten, like you said, right? It's all basic.
It is. It's foundational. Even in dealing with industry trends and hype waves, it's important to take a step back and not get caught up in the emotion of it or the FOMO. It's a great term that everybody has now, that there's things like Facebook and LinkedIn. Just because you are not implementing a technology that you are hearing so much about does not mean you're doing it all wrong. Certainly the vendors would want you to believe that because it's in their best interest. And, the news sort of gets caught up in that hype wave too. So to me, it's more about, is that the logical next step for our organization? Does that present value to the organization that we don't otherwise have, or better value than what we're doing now? And those are more important questions to ask. And certainly that there's a place for not just responding to what the organization is telling me they want, but bringing to them, hey, have you thought about this? And helping them, collaborating, because that's important too. you can certainly play a role at a time in an organization when it's smaller of sort of just keeping up with how the organization's moving. But there's certainly a time where you need to be a leader and a change agent and really start to promote, technologies or methodologies that you feel are going to be better for the organization.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, like you said, you're a leader. You're growing these folks. You have these folks. Of course, they at some level they got to deal with the technology, right? Because you're steering the ship. You're up on top of the deck, and they're down below. They're doing stuff. They have to. I mean, that's just part of what we all got to do, right?
Absolutely.
So, and that's just, it is what it is. I mean, it's at some level somebody's got to do that. But where you are and what you want to do is leadership. Handle these folks. If you got the right people and you got the right attitudes and the right expectations. I mean, expectations, again, I live by that. I live by that all day, every day with my kids, with everybody, if you're not leveling expectations, you're in trouble.
And the foundation of expectations is clear communication. And again, acting logically and being truthful. It doesn't help to set expectations that are unrealistic. That's just going to, like you said, burn people out, whether you're in your work life or your home life. It's about getting everyone on the same page and really honestly wanting everyone to thrive. I don't see how, as a leader, I stand to benefit at all from being unfair with the people in my organization for, I don't want to call it lying, but for exaggerating or for underreporting. It's misspoken communication is just not worth it. So it's important to really learn those things. And again, I wasn't born this way. It took me time. I didn't do a lot of this, and that's how I got there. Is I looked back and analyzed where I failed and said, okay, that's a great learning moment. And realizing that I live and die by the team. I don't. Another sort of foundational concept we live by within our IT team is no hero mode. And I define hero mode as, which a lot of organizations seem to embrace, is, who's that person who just always seems to step up at the last minute to put out the critical fire. And all organizations, regardless of how well staffed, how well organized, they're going to have crises. They're going to have fire drills. And certainly when you're in a startup and a growing company, you get more than your share of those because there's just so much to do and not enough people. And that's just the way it is. That's okay. But we really tried to promote this no hero mode attitude within our organization, which is basically, again, and I've seen it time and time again, people fail to plan correctly, which leads to a crisis. And then they pull an all-nighter or they go above and beyond to fix it. And yes, that's great. And they should be commended for that. But there should also be some analysis to say, well, actually, if you had planned it correctly and communicated it correctly, there would not have been a crisis. So, you don't want to be the firefighter who, is always first to the fire. And then people start to say, why is that?
Yeah.
Are you possibly causing those fires? And,
Right.
and then you get your hero commendation. Nothing against firefighters, not saying they do that, but
Right.
that's the metaphor. It's about not creating the fire in the first place. And then you don't have to run and put it out.
Right.
And that's tough, right? Because we as humans, we want that adrenaline surge. We want that. A lot of people do. You want that dopamine reaction of, oh, I did it. I took care of it. But really, I think the boring, everything is working really well and there are no fires to put out is better than that living on the edge of your seat constantly.
Yeah.
So it's really important for us in our organization to really no hero mode as much as possible. Sometimes it happens, but I don't think it necessarily should always be as commended as it is. I think sometimes it's more important to say, well, why did we get in that predicament in the first place? And how can we make sure it doesn't happen in the future?
Yeah. No, that's interesting. And I do see that. I see that quite a bit from organizations where they get to that point. And to what you're saying, to your point, they reward that, and
they thrive on it. Every organization has their their own little award system, spot awards, or, caught you doing good, or whatever you call it. But I think if you went back and did an analysis, you'd see a lot of those awards are dependent on a potential crisis situation that didn't have to happen. And maybe part of it is the fact that no one gets an award for just having everything run really well. You're not as easily noticed. And for me, I've been in the IT sphere for over 30 years now. That's just something I embraced from the beginning. You're a lot of times you're going to be on the sidelines. You're just going to be keeping things running. And then people only notice when it breaks. That's okay. That's just a part of what I signed up for. Certainly as growing into a leader and taking a more active role, collaborating with the organization, some of that changes, but it's still, again, foundational. Just keep things running well, plan, don't have the crises. And everybody's in a much better place for it.
Sure. This is great stuff. And like you said, yeah, tech podcast, but we don't get into the people part of it much. And that's my business, right? So, I hear about this all
your
day
business
long.
For sure.
It is. I hear about this all day long, where I can't tell you how many calls I've gotten from individuals telling me, I'm at this company. I've been here 6 months. Totally different than what I expected. Totally different from what they told me. None of them have ever come from yours. None of them have ever come from your place. Okay. But yeah, it's just, it's crazy, and I don't know how long. I guess folks just feel like they can keep getting away with it. They cycle through folks. I don't really know, but it's just, to me, it's like, wow, that's short-sighted.
Well, it certainly checks boxes. It satisfies the spreadsheet. If you're managing by a spreadsheet, and it's easy to fall into that trap for sure. Well, we just need people, and we have people, so that should have solved the problem. Why didn't it? Because there's more to it. That's why it didn't do it.
Yeah, you wonder what the motivation is, or what those boxes are that they're checking, or what the metrics are they're measuring success by on that hire. And it certainly isn't longevity, because they're calling me 6 months later saying, "Isn't what I signed up for," or it was, I don't know, I got to be in every day when I was told I only got to be in 2 days, or whatever. You know what I mean, right?
Right.
I don't have to be.
And organizational culture is key to that. Again, I've been fortunate to be at a company that from day one when I started, and Acorda was only 5 years old when I joined it. Our CEO, Ron, started it in his bedroom closet in Manhattan and built it into a small office. And then that's when I joined in. And what was always great and what I felt fortunate about it was that you knew from the moment you met him that what mattered most was, of course, the patients that at the time we were going to help. We weren't able to yet. We were still researching and trying to get our drug approved, our therapy approved. But the people who are working at the organization, it was so vitally important that everybody knew that they were so valuable to the organization. If you were there, it's because you were valuable and you were meant to do something valuable for this organization. No, and nothing's perfect. People do come and go, even in our organization, even on my team. And it's even something that I had to learn to embrace, is that you aren't necessarily doing great if no one's leaving either. It's not that you need people to leave or you need people to stay. Sometimes it's okay for people to move on. And again, it works out for the best for everyone. But that culture, that organizational culture, needs to start from the bottom up. And I'm sure, every time I go on LinkedIn, there's always some great quotes on there that people post about, this part of culture needs to start with the CEO, or it won't work. And I just saw one recently, security mindedness starts with the CEO, and those things are key. They have to start at the top and work their way down. And I'm so very fortunate that with our organization, they did. Caring about the people in the organization and caring about the people we were helping was paramount. And if you did that, that the success and the opportunities would go from there. So it was just so great to develop my leadership style in an environment that had the right culture. It was really great.
That's awesome. No, well, thank you for sharing all that. Totally different perspective, totally different from the other conversations I've had, making it more of a people than a bites business, even though bites is in the title of my podcast, right? But that's good. No, because that's my business, right? My business is people. And to understand, to your point, it came from the top. And when you met Ron, right? Isn't that what you said his name was? When you met him, I mean, you knew that this was going to be about people, and you and he are aligned in obviously in how you think about what we're doing to get to where we need to go. From that.
Absolutely. And again, just use those fundamentals to make your deliberations based on the simple stuff of what will be of best value to the organization. What is the right way to do it? How do I plan it? And that the rest sort of falls
into place, especially if you have the right people, right?
Absolutely. I mean, this is great news for you, Steve. People are not going away. Organizations will not run on AI anytime soon.
I don't think so.
And I love playing around with AI. And I love seeing how now you can make whole songs using AI.
Right.
And that's really cool. And you can change your voice or change, how you look and all of that. Wonderful stuff. If you're using that tool correctly, of course. You can use a hammer in a productive way and a not so productive way. So AI is the same thing, but it all comes down to, do you have the right people? To me, that's not going to go away. You don't have to worry. People are going to be hiring in IT for a long time to come. When the time comes that an AI manager comes into being, I'll be very interested. I'll probably be well out of the workforce at that time, but it's for now. Yeah.
Well, I thank you for your time. That was awesome. I don't know if you watch any of my other podcasts, but usually at the end of the podcast, I ask each guest one final question, and it's the same question.
Okay.
Live music.
Go ahead.
Live music concerts. Do you have a live concert or music that you've ever seen that you would say is your favorite concert or favorite live music that you've ever seen?
Oh, sure. I'm going to completely expose myself as a nerd because of this.
I can't wait. I'm on the edge of my seat now.
My favorite live concert experience is Rush.
Love it.
And they are a nerd band, and I've been a fan of them forever. I went to see them in concert for the first time in 1988, I believe it was. It was an amazing experience, and I've seen them many times since then. And unfortunately, they are no longer a band, but that was an amazing, inspirational, and it's the kind of music that a lot of people like if they're into mathematics and computers. It just fits. And it's been some of the best live music experiences. I've been to all sorts of different concerts, but the Rush concerts were always the best.
So I'm from a family of 4 boys. My 3 brothers have all seen Rush multiple times. I don't know.
You missed out.
Flaked on it. And I was reading an article recently. They were talking about prog rock, right? They were talking about Genesis, and they were talking about all those bands. They threw Rush in there. I see it.
Oh, yeah.
I see it, but I didn't originally have them there,
Rush is prog, has been since the beginning. If you go back to their early catalog, it's Lord of the Rings type stuff.
Yeah, 2112 was great. What a great album.
2112, total, early cyberpunk concept album. I mean, their first album was pretty straight ahead, Led Zeppelin-esque, Cream-esque rock and roll for the 70s. And then they took a turn, in my opinion, for the better.
Yeah.
And I've loved their entire catalog.
And how many bands do you have that were the drummers writing most everything, right? Neil Peart, who unfortunately passed away, right? But
yeah, an amazing, and by the way, a great example of someone who, they called him the professor.
They did.
But he didn't have a lot of formal education. What he did was he strived for self-improvement in all areas of his life. And, when they were touring, what did you do on the bus? What he did was he read and he read and he read and he absorbed that and, built his own philosophy around it and created, in my opinion, some of the best lyrics and poetry that any band has. And they've always been a great example. Again, in general, all 3 of them, Geddy, Alex, Neil, are great examples of continuous self-improvement. I mean, those guys never stopped trying to improve, regardless of where they were in their careers. They never, phoned it in. They never sat back and rested on their laurels. They always tried something new and something better, even in eras when people, now they're all synthesizers. They're not as rock anymore, but it was something new. They were always trying something new. And it's always been an inspiration for me. I'm a bit of a musician. I'm not classically trained, but I play guitar. I've played drums. I've been in bands. And regardless of the type of music I play, and I listen to all kinds of music, but that's my go-to. If you tell me you got to go on a 6-hour drive, what are you playing? I'm going to start the Rush catalog from the first album and just listen all the way through. That's my guilty pleasure.
That's great. That's awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. We learned some good stuff
welcome.
Today. I really, really, really appreciate it.
I hope so. I hope it was good stuff.
It was. It's really good stuff.
It's good. I'm glad it worked out.
Well, thank you for joining us.